Thank you very much, Michael. As Michael said before, my name is Aaron De Rosario. I'm Executive Leader of Regulatory Reform. I'd like you to welcome you all to today's webinar, where we will be discussing the current consultation we have on the Heavy Vehicle National Law Amendment Bill and regulations. So we're currently consulting on two documents, a set of regulations and a draft bill. For those of you who have had an opportunity to look at our website, we'll provide links later in the presentation to the materials that we're consulting on. We have 4 documents available for you to have a look at. The first is a consultation summary, which provides an overview of all the work that has led to us drafting this particular bill and regulations. The second document is an explanatory document that explains in detail all the various changes that are proposed to the Heavy Vehicle National Law and its regulations. The third document is a copy of the draft amendment bill for you to have a look at and to read in conjunction with the explanatory document. And the fourth document is the amendment regulations, again, best read in conjunction with the explanatory document, which describes and goes through detail the various changes that are being made to the law. They're the 4 documents that we're consulting on using for our consultation process. At the end of this presentation, we'll make sure that you get a link. So if you haven't had a look at those documents yet, you know where to find them. Going into the detail, I just want to provide you an update on how we've come to be in the position where we are consulting on this draft law. And in particular, I want to draw attention to 4 really key milestones that have happened over the last 2 years. Back in August 2022, ministers approved a package of reforms for the NTC to work in conjunction with jurisdictions on, and that package of reforms comprised both legislative and non-legislative changes. The package is often known as the Konofsky package, was the result of some work done by Mr. Ken Konofsky in bringing together stakeholders to determine a way forward for some of the heavy vehicle national law reforms. In June 2023, ministers endorsed 14 recommendations outlined in what we call a Decision Regulation Impact Statement, which is a document that looks at all the various options for change and provides a case for why particular options have been selected. The 14 recommendations that ministers made laid the groundwork for how we wanted to change the structure of the law so it was more flexible and versatile going forward. In October 2023, the NTC released what we call the Consultation Regulation Impact Statement. This puts forward some options for consideration. We put forward options to be considered and analysed in the areas of fatigue management, access, and enhancing operator assurance. In September 2024, ministers endorsed a further 12 recommendations coming out of that consultation process that we conducted in October, and they included changes to fatigue record keeping and enforcement, height and length limits, as well as some general mass limits. All these various changes are what are informing the structure of the law that we are amending at the moment and some of the work that we're going to be doing in the near future. So let's talk about some of the proposed changes which are being embedded into the draft bill and regulations that we have out for consultation. First of all, we have a tiered safety assurance system, which provides a baseline for operators that just require prescriptive, simple and straightforward rules to follow, as well as an alternative compliance tier for operators that require additional flexibility and have gone through the accreditation process. The accreditation process is an enhanced version of the National Heavy Vehicle Accreditation Scheme. And the key enhancements we're making to this is to allow more flexibility and in particular, allow the regulator to develop alternate compliance options within set limits. In addition, as an enhancement to the NHVAS, it will be established around a safety management system as a core accreditation requirement. So all operators seeking accreditation will be required to have a safety management system, and they'll need to have that safety management system accredited as part of their opportunity to access alternate compliance, such as fatigue management options. The new law also expands the current duty for a driver not to drive while fatigued to include not driving if unfit for any other reason. And that's an important change to enhance public safety, and it focuses really on temporal conditions or temporary conditions that a driver might be experienced, be that temporary illness or temporary injury that might otherwise impede their ability to drive a heavy vehicle. In terms of boosting productivity, the current general mass limits will be increased to match the current concessional mass limits. So that allows various combinations of heavy vehicles to access a higher level of mass or a higher permitted mass. Importantly, the concessional mass limit that currently exists will be removed and higher mass limits will be unchanged. We're also looking to increase the general access height limit from 4.3 to 4.6 metres. However, there's some important additional work that needs to happen before that particular reform goes through, and that is further technical analysis to determine appropriate rollover controls, and that work is currently being done by the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. Likewise, general access vehicle length will be increased from 19 to 20 metres. Again, pending some further work being done at the moment by the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator to determine appropriate controls in this instance for additional length. They are controls to prevent or to control swept path and to make sure that we're protecting infrastructure and, importantly, vulnerable road users. In terms of record keeping and enforcement, there will be some changes to the regulations that will simplify certain work diary requirements, keeping only essential record keeping requirements there. So some of the current features of the work diary will be made non-mandatory, such as totaling the number of hours per week and including the day of the week. Authorised officers will be able to issue formal warnings for a broader range of breaches, which includes fatigue record keeping. Formal education will be introduced as an option for certain work diary administrative offences. Again, there's some further work to be done to determine the most appropriate implementation pathway. But what this option means is that there will be circumstances where a driver may elect to do or accept formal education in lieu of receiving an infringement. And finally, enforcement changes will align the heavy vehicle national law with some other laws to allow improvement notices and prosecution processes to occur concurrently. And that's to ensure that the HVNL remains current with other types of legislation. Some of the other changes that are included in this package, there will be a new national audit standard, which will be created by the regulator and approved by ministers. The audit standard performs a number of functions. First of all, it's there to ensure there is integrity and robustness in the National Heavy Vehicle Accreditation Scheme, but also by enhancing the assurance environment, enhancing the audit environment, it is hoped that those audits will be recognised by other parties in the chain of responsibility to reduce the instance of duplicate auditing across the chain. Codes of practice, which provide operators, drivers and other parties with guidance on how they can meet their obligations under the primary duty, they'll now be developed and approved by the regulator. This will support guidance to drivers and other parties in the chain and lead to better safety outcomes and compliance. Ministerial powers will also be adjusted so they can direct the regulator to take action where there is a serious public risk. And again, this is a change that brings the HVNL in line with other pieces of legislation. And a general streamlining of the law to make it simpler and more flexible so that it is easier in future to make changes to the HVNL to recognise changing technologies, changing business models and changing expectations from what the regulatory environment should be achieving. So now let's talk about the legislative package, which is what we are consulting on at the moment, which internally we describe as the February 2025 package, because it's at the end of 2025 that the NTC will be presenting that package for ministers to consider and finalise. The package comprises two components. It comprises an amendment bill, which is designed to change the primary law or the heavy vehicle national law, and a set of amendment regulations which are designed to change the various sets of regulations that are made under the heavy vehicle national law. The amendment bill, that has to be approved by the Infrastructure and Transport Ministers meeting, or ITM as we call it, and then that bill gets transferred to the Queensland Parliament and it has to be passed through the Queensland Parliament, which is the host jurisdiction for the heavy vehicle national law. Likewise, the regulations must also be approved by ministers, and then they get taken to Queensland and they are made by the Queensland Government in Council, and that's the process by which regulations are made. Importantly, however, when the Queensland Parliament go to consider the bill, they will want to see both the legislation and the proposed regulations so they can see what the overall regulatory environment looks like before they present it or before they choose to vote on that particular package and pass the regulatory amendments. As part of the bill and regulations that we are currently consulting on, we are also consulting on the outcomes of the penalties review that the NTC undertook. So the NTC went through all 349 offences that are contained in the current heavy vehicle national law using a penalty assessments matrix, which is a document and a system that's been put together specifically for the purpose of grading and evaluating penalties. Through that process, which involved extensive consultation with state government agencies, police, the NHVR, as well as industry associations and industry participants, we determined that there would be 21 penalty decreases and 50 penalty increases across those 349 offences. The proposed penalty decreases tend to be for the more common but less serious offences, and that includes some of the document carrying offences, some of the low-level fatigue-related offences and administrative offences. And then there are 50 penalty increases, which tend to be for the less common but more serious offences. The updated penalties are included in the public exposure draft and the process review. Importantly, the draft package shows a set of unindexed penalties. In the heavy vehicle national law, each year penalty amounts are indexed. Our draft bill shows the unindexed amount. However, we have an additional document in addition to the four I described earlier, which provides you information about what the index level of those penalties are. So you'll be able to see those changes and what they mean should they be implemented today. Let's talk about the public consultation. The public consultation process on our draft bill and regulations, that opened on the 10th of October. And as I said earlier, it's accompanied by some explanatory documents that outline the amendments. So both an explanatory document which details every change that's been made in the law and in the regulations, as well as a consultation summary document which describes how we got to this particular position and some of the policy background to the changes that have been proposed. If you are going through either the bill or the regulations, it is much easier to read and understand those documents if you look at them side by side with the explanatory document. Amendment bills are more complex to read than an ordinary piece of legislation, and therefore I do recommend that you have a look at that document side by side with the explanatory document so that you can understand what the change is, how it's being made, and why it's being made. The purpose of our consultation is not so much to determine what policy settings should be made. In many respects, in fact, in all respects, the policy decisions that drive these particular changes have already been set. What we need to ensure is that the policy decisions of ministers have been translated correctly into the legislation, and to make sure that we haven't inadvertently introduced errors into the law. That is something which in particular we want people to be looking through and looking for when they go through the legislation, because it's very important that we retain the integrity and accuracy of the legislative process and of the legislation so that when it takes effect, it works effectively. The consultation closes on the 21st of November. So that is Thursday, the 21st of November, so in just under 2 weeks. So please, if you have comments, views, please make sure you have a look at these documents, go through them and provide us with feedback as soon as is convenient for you. A bit of a high-level timeline here, and I think the important piece to look here is that we're in November already, and on the 21st of November, we have the close of consultation. What happens after consultation closes is we take all the feedback that we receive and we work with Parliamentary Council, and that's the organisation that drafts and does the actual drafting of the law, take the feedback, make any changes that we need to do so. We need to do that bit of work by middle of December. And then again, in late January and through February, we'll be doing the final bits of work to finalise the draft bill and regulations, ready to submit that to ministers for their consideration. We've already done a range of public consultation activities, including this particular webinar and a range of other meetings with other organisations. And we're always open to further engagement if you have any questions and queries about the draft bill or regulations. I want to talk a little bit about the mass dimensional loading regulation changes. And that's because those particular changes are not included in the draft bill or regulations that you'll see out for consultation. So again, just reiterating what those changes are, it's increasing length from 19 to 20 metres, increasing height from 4.3 to 4.6, increasing general mass limits to the current concessional mass limits. And also an important change that we're going to be incorporating, which is to increase the twin steer axle spacing from 2 to 2.5 metres to support Euro 6. Now, that one is actually being included in the draft regulations and the draft changes. However, those other changes, the 19 to 20, 4.3 to 4.6 and GML to CML, they are all subject to some further work. And so we're hoping that those particular regulations will be developed and consulted on in Q1 2025. However, even though they won't all be going through at the same time, we are writing those that they come in so that they come into effect at the same time as the rest of the law. So again, early next year, there'll be some more consultation with us about how we've constructed those regulations to make sure that ministers' decisions are able to proceed. There is some other work. The journey of the heavy vehicle national law does not end with this particular legislative change process, so there is some other work going forward. I've already mentioned the mass dimension and loading regulation changes. There is also work on that education option to provide the education option in lieu of an infringement. There is some more work that to be done on that so that that can take and go through at the first available opportunity. Ministers have previously made decisions about a technology and data framework in the heavy vehicle national law to better recognise technology and facilitate new technologies. We will be doing some further work on that and introduce that at a later point. And there is also some important work that is happening, such as the performance-based standards and the PBS 2.0 that the NHVR is working on. If there is a need for any regulatory changes to support that, they will be on hand to make sure that those changes go through. And likewise, the National Access System, often described as HVAMs, if there are supporting regulatory changes to support that, will be on hand to make sure that they are made. Further to that, we want to ensure that there is a regular maintenance and update schedule for the heavy vehicle national law, and we'll be developing a forward-looking work program to make sure that other issues as they arise are able to be addressed, and so that the law is able to remain current and change as business needs change. And of course, important in doing that is to understand what industry's priorities are. So at some point early next year, we will certainly be engaging again about what are industry's priorities for further changes to the heavy vehicle national law and the regulatory environment, so that we can factor that into our future work. If I take us back to the very beginning, these are the 4 documents that are available on our website. There is a short URL at the top of this slide, and we'll make these slides available. And if you click on that, you'll be taken straight to where all the materials are found. Or otherwise, if you're familiar with the NTC website and you go to the NTC website and go through to the heavy vehicle national law section, you'll be able to find the consultation materials. Again, we have a consultation summary, an explanatory document, as well as drafts of the amendment bill and the amendment regulations. I want to reiterate that our consultation closes on Thursday, the 21st of November, and we look forward to receiving any feedback and any views, opinions, thoughts and advice on or before that particular date. Well, thank you. That brings an end to the formal presentation component.